Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about the two books and the film that we looked at this week. The two books I chose, I stuck with the dystopian theme and books that I've read before in the past because I like rereading books and looking through them in like a teacher's lens and seeing how I can incorporate them into my classroom. Um, so I've read these books before and I own them, so it was just easier for me that way. Um, all right, so I'm going to talk about the first book I read. I read Divergent, which was released in 2011, so it's right on the edge of being at the 5 year mark. But it's a part of a trilogy, so it goes on. So I figured that the story was still recent enough because it's a trilogy and it's not completed until, the final book. So I read Divergent, and so some of the themes I noticed is, the search for identity, romance, um, resistance, opposition to the government. Um, and, for the identity portion, it starts out in the beginning with the choosing ceremony, where adolescents can choose which faction they would like to join. Um, and I really thought that scene had the most like emotion because it's these adolescents going in, they're trying to find themselves, but overall, it matters what their parents think, in their minds, and they don't want to disappoint them and choose a different faction than their parents because it's kind of labeled as a failure. In fact, the term is defective, and I think that's really a negative connotation. Um, a child defects from their parents, so the parents kind of failed them to bring them into the faction. So that was just my take on that. Um, so yeah, there's a discrepancy between the pressure to choose your family over who you really are. Um, and then for the politics side of it and how I would incorporate it into the classroom, there's a dispute over the governing faction. So there's, um, inside all the factions, you have one that rules abnegation over the rest of the factions, and they kind of like delegate things. But that's a issue of contention in their society right now, because erudite would like to, they feel like they should rule. So I think that really says something about the human nature and the desire to rule or control. And that's certainly a topic, with tyranny and resistance revolution that can be incorporated into a history classroom and a politics classroom. Um, so that's what I pulled out for um, tying it to the curriculum. Okay, so for the taboo topics, I thought that the relationship between four interests would be, um, because it's a bit of a romance in that sense, that would be a source of contention, I think, why parents might not want their students to read the book or, choose to censor them from it. And the quote I chose from it is when Four explains his tattoos, and he says, "I don't want to be just one thing." And Four has tattoos of each faction. So I thought that really says something about where he is, about finding his identity. He wants to be everything. He doesn't want to just be brave. He wants to be smart. He wants to be wise. And I think that's really a relatable thing for students, finding their identity, and they don't want it to be just one thing. They want to be multidimensional. They want to be divergent. They want to think for themselves. And I think that's the core of what the book is talking about here. All right, so I'm going to move on. The next book I read was Legend. Again, it was released in 2011, but it's part of a series, so I thought that it would be okay because the story moves on. So, it's about June and Day, and the characters are really on opposing sides. There's the concept of identity in this novel as well, because Day is from a poor sector while June is from a wealthy military sector, and then the society is really built on a militaristic level, with children being evaluated, them being processed into the military society, and really weeding out and picking out the best ones that would fit the military's mold. And there's really a issue with that, because it turns out that the government only likes to promote wealthy students, so children who grow up from the military background already. So I think that for the topics that relate to the classroom, I would talk about, child soldiers, maybe related to colonies in Africa, how African governments after the age of imperialism really struggled, and how they used child soldiers to further their political aims. That's what I would talk about. Okay. And the quote I chose, got it right here. It's about identity. In the mirror, I look the same, but I am a different person inside. I'm a prodigy who knows the truth, and I know exactly what I'm going to do. So here's this epiphany moment, this realization moment, where June, the main character, decides that, she's been living a lie. She's been growing up in this militaristic society, and they're really just hurting people. They're being biased, and they're not really doing what's best for society. And another element that I thought could fit well into the classroom was that the society uses chemical warfare on their citizens, and they kind of test them on the poor sectors, and then use it to advance the war front. And I thought that's definitely a topic that could be used when you're studying the concept of war. So, for example, perhaps you could relate it back to Vietnam, the use of Agent Orange, or even current events with Syria. I think that this novel could definitely have a place in the classroom, and it certainly could be relatable to students because they're really finding themselves and learning the truth about the world that they live in. And last, I'm going to talk about Ender's Game. I really, really enjoyed this film. I thought it was great. So again, you have the concept of child soldiers. So for the curriculum, like I said, I'd relate it back to Africa, struggling societies using child soldiers. And then there's also the concept of colonization, when the alien invaders come in, they're trying to colonize Earth, or that's how it's explained in the intro. So, why do people colonize? What are the gains from it? How does it impact the civilization as it moves on? So I think that could be integrated in the classroom as well. Okay. And there's also identity, the concept of identity in this, in that Ender is trying to please everyone. He's trying to be the commander that they want him to be, but he's also struggling with himself. He doesn't know if he's violent, for example. He doesn't want to turn into his brother. He wants to be compassionate, but he has to be violent in order to further the militaristic agenda that the commander wants him to. So he's got this immense pressure to save everyone. And I think it's really just too much to bear for him. And they really manipulate him into and use his brain against him to eradicate this society, this alien society. So the quote I chose from the movie is, "Sir, you made them hate me." So that's when he's getting off the ship and he's saying, "Commander, you made them hate me. Now my peers don't respect me because you put me up on this pedestal." And really, that's what the commander's trying to do throughout this whole movie. Right off the bat, when he goes to battle school, he is isolated from his peers. Then as he gains their respect, he gets switched to another regiment, and then he has to do this all over again. And it's really, the commander thinks that he's training him to be strong, to not have to depend on anyone, but I think it's really a manipulation tactic, and the bullying side and maybe feeling isolated from your peers is definitely could be a relatable theme for our students. So, again, I really liked everything that I encountered this week in this block. It was great, and it's definitely I think I can relate all these things back to my curriculum. So, again, thanks for watching, guys, and have a good rest of the week.